When it comes to cancer, I think most people know that sugar is bad. How bad is sugar?
Sugar is very bad. Sugar is very bad. Um, some folks will say, well, everything winds up being sugar in our bodies anyway, so what's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big difference between sugar that, if you think about a pipe, about a faucet, and you turn it on and it drips very slowly, that leaves a very different picture in your sink than if you turn the faucet on at full speed and it floods the sink out. And that's kind of what happens when we eat white flour and things that, simple carbohydrates and things that turn into sugar immediately. So it's like turning that faucet on full blast. So cancer cells do look for sugar because they are dependent on sugar for their metabolism. Whereas our other cells can metabolize fats and proteins and ketone bodies, but our cancer cells can only metabolize sugar and glutamine, and that's about it. So they depend on it, so they actually, sort of go out looking for it more than other cells. But the thing that I think concerns me even more is that when we do eat a lot of sugar, our insulin levels go up because insulin is our hormone designed to manage excessive blood sugar. And insulin is a very important hormone. It's our fat storage hormone, and it's a growth hormone. So hormones generate signals. They give instructions, basically. So insulin is one of those hormones that gives instructions to things in the body to grow. So if you have a small tumor in your body and you're flooding it with insulin, which is giving instructions to all your cells, giving it growth messages, that's a pretty bad thing.
Are different sugars worse than others? I mean, when you think of fruit, we know there's a certain kind of sugar in that.
Well,
Is that different?
again, yes, there are differences among sugars. Part of the difference has to do with, again, how fast it gets into your bloodstream.
Okay.
So if you eat a piece of fruit that has a lot of fiber, that's going to slow down the release of sugar in your bloodstream. That means that you're not going to get that insulin rush. So you're not going to have that whole syndrome where you get overloaded with sugar and then you have a compensatory insulin surge, really, to deal with that. So anytime you combine sugar with fat or fiber or protein, you're going to slow down the release of that sugar. So that's a good thing. But there's also sugars themselves that are just toxic. For example, beet sugar is now a GMO, genetically modified form of sugar. It comes from GM sugar beets.
Sure.
That's a completely alien substance to our body and it has no business being in our bodies. So, we want to avoid that. Same for artificial sugars. Aspartame turns to methanol in the intestines as we metabolize it, and methanols are known carcinogen. Splenda is made with chlorine. Chlorine has a lot of deleterious effects in our body. It's pretty bad for our thyroid gland. It also helps to wipe out that nice probiotic population in our intestines. So the artificial sweeteners are toxic as well. Sometimes we can be okay if we have very small amounts of natural, healthful sweeteners like raw honey, where those really helpful enzymes haven't been pasteurized out of it yet. So if we do that in very, very small amounts and we don't have blood sugar issues, in other words, if we monitor and we can see that our insulin levels and our blood sugar levels are under control, then a little bit of very healthy sweeteners I think is fine. But that's why it's important to know what your numbers are. Because if you've got high fasting insulin or a high hemoglobin A1C, your body's not handling any sugar very well. You really need to stay away from all sugars.